How would you react if your husband handed you a thick envelope full of printed messages and legal papers after you refused to block the man you cheated with? Can anyone really justify keeping an affair partner in their life, even as their marriage falls apart? This is the story of what happened when I tried, and how my husband's revenge changed everything. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The evening light filtered through our living room curtains as I curled up on the couch, scrolling through my phone. Nate sat across from me in his worn leather chair, the same one he'd bought when we first moved in together 8 years ago. The silence between us had grown heavier over the past few weeks, punctuated only by the sound of our 7-year-old daughter Maddie playing in her room upstairs. "Isolde, we need to talk," Nate said, his voice carrying that careful tone he used when he was trying not to start a fight. I didn't look up from my phone. "What about?" "About Colin." My fingers paused over the screen. Colin Day worked in my office, just 2 cubicles down from mine. We'd started talking during coffee breaks about 6 months ago, and somehow those conversations had evolved into something more intimate. Late-night texts, lunch meetings, shared complaints about our respective relationships. "What about him?" I asked, finally meeting Nate's eyes. His brown hair was disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. "I know you've been talking to him, a lot." Nate leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "The late-night texts, the lunch meetings, people are starting to notice, Isolde." I felt my defenses rise immediately. "We're just friends, Nate. God, you're so paranoid." "Friends don't text each other at midnight about their marriage problems." "How would you know what we talk about?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "Because you're my wife, and I can see you pulling away from me. From us." His voice cracked slightly. "I'm asking you to block his number. Delete him from social media. Whatever this is, it needs to stop." I stood up abruptly, my phone clutched in my hand. "You're being controlling, Nate. Colin actually listens to me. He understands what I'm going through." "What you're going through?" Nate's voice rose. "What are you going through that you can't talk to your husband about?" "You wouldn't understand. You're always so cold, so distant. When was the last time you asked me how my day was? When did you last actually care about my feelings?" The hurt that flashed across Nate's face almost made me regret the words. Almost. "I ask you every day how your day was," he said quietly. "You just don't answer anymore." "That's not the same thing, and you know it." Footsteps on the stairs interrupted us. Maddie appeared in the doorway, her blonde hair messy from playing, clutching her stuffed elephant. "Why are you yelling?" "We're not yelling, sweetheart," I said quickly, forcing a smile. "Mommy and Daddy were just talking." But Maddie's blue eyes, so much like Nate's, were wide with worry. She'd been more clingy lately, especially with Nate. Children always sense when something's wrong, even when adults try to hide it. "Come here, Bug," Nate said, opening his arms. Maddie ran to him, and he lifted her onto his lap. "Everything's okay." I watched them together and felt a stab of something, guilt, maybe, or jealousy, at how easily Maddie sought comfort from him. My phone buzzed with a text from Colin. "Hope you're having a better evening than I am. Thinking of you." I smiled despite myself and quickly typed back, "Same here." "Talk tomorrow?" "Always," came his immediate reply. Nate was watching me over Maddie's head, and I saw the exact moment he realized I was texting Colin. His jaw tightened. After Maddie went back upstairs, my phone rang. Mum's contact photo filled the screen, a picture from last Christmas where she was wearing her favorite red sweater and her most judgmental expression. "Hi, Mom." "Isolde, honey, I just wanted to check on you. You sounded upset when we talked yesterday." I glanced at Nate, who was pretending to read a magazine. "I'm fine, Mom. Just dealing with some relationship stuff." Is Nate being difficult again? It's complicated. I walked into the kitchen for privacy. He's being really controlling about my friendships. He wants me to stop talking to people at work. That doesn't sound healthy, sweetheart. You have every right to have friends. Don't let him isolate you. Mom had never been Nate's biggest fan. She thought he was too quiet, too serious. Not exciting enough for my vibrant daughter, she'd once said. I know, Mom. It's just hard. You're doing nothing wrong by having friends, Isolde. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for that. After hanging up, I felt vindicated. Mum was right. I wasn't doing anything wrong. Colin and I were just friends. Close friends who understood each other in ways our spouses didn't. Later that evening, Priya Sethi, my best friend since college, called while I was getting ready for bed. Girl, you looked so happy in those photos from lunch today, she said. You and Colin make such a cute pair. Priya, we're just friends. Uh-huh. Friends who look at each other like that. I could hear her grinning through the phone. There's nothing wrong with having someone who makes you smile, Isolde. Life's too short to be miserable. After we hung up, I found myself looking through the photos from lunch. Colin and I did look happy together. When was the last time Nate had made me laugh like that? I posted one of the photos to Instagram, Colin and me laughing over coffee, with Priya making a silly face in the background. I tagged them both and added the caption, "Good friends make everything better." Within minutes, the likes and comments started rolling in. You look so happy. Love this. Friendship goals. I was scrolling through the responses when I heard Nate's footsteps on the stairs. He paused at the bedroom doorway, his phone in his hand. He'd seen the post. Without a word, he turned and walked back downstairs. I heard the front door close quietly a few minutes later. My phone buzzed with a comment from Colin. Best part of my day. I hearted his comment and turned off the light, telling myself that Nate was overreacting. I wasn't doing anything wrong. Colin and I were just friends who happened to understand each other better than our own spouses understood us. But as I lay in the dark, listening for Nate's car in the driveway, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered that maybe things weren't as simple as I was pretending they were. The next day at lunch, I met Colin at Riverside Cafe, our usual spot downtown. It was a cozy place, with exposed brick walls and mismatched furniture that made it feel intimate despite being in the middle of the business district. Colin was already there when I arrived, sitting at our regular table by the window. You look stressed, he said as I sat down, his green eyes full of concern. Colin had this way of really seeing me that made my heart race. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that was always slightly messy in an endearing way. Nate and I had another fight last night, I said, stirring sugar into my coffee. He's being so unreasonable about our friendship. I'm sorry you're going through this. Colin reached across the table and briefly touched my hand. You don't deserve to be treated like that. He wants me to block your number. Can you believe that? Colin's eyebrows rose. Seriously? That's pretty controlling. That's what I said, and my mum agrees. She thinks he's trying to isolate me from my friends. We were deep in conversation about how difficult marriage could be when Priya appeared at our table like a whirlwind. She was wearing a bright yellow dress that made her dark hair shine, and she had that mischievous look in her eyes that usually meant trouble. Well, 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 she said loudly, sliding into the empty chair next to me. If it isn't the cutest couple in the cafe. Priya, I hissed, glancing around nervously. Several people from our office building ate here regularly. What? I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. She waved at the waitress. You two have that glow that people get when they're really connecting with someone. Colin shifted uncomfortably. We're just friends, Priya. Sure you are, she said with a wink. And I'm just a casual observer who definitely doesn't ship you two together. I noticed Janet from accounting, sitting 2 tables over, clearly listening to our conversation. She was the office gossip queen, and I could practically see her filing away this information for later use. So, Isolde, Priya continued at full volume, how's Nate the doormat handling your newfound happiness? Priya, please, I whispered. What? I'm just asking. That man has all the personality of wet cardboard. No wonder you're blooming now that you have someone interesting to talk to. Colin looked increasingly uncomfortable. Maybe we should keep it down a bit. Why? There's nothing wrong with friendship, Priya declared. Although, if I was single and had someone looking at me the way Colin looks at you, I'd definitely be exploring my options. By now, half the cafe was listening to our conversation. I saw Janet pull out her phone and start typing rapidly. When I got home that evening, Nate was helping Maddie with her homework at the kitchen table. They looked up when I walked in, and I immediately felt like an intruder in my own home. How was work? Nate asked, his voice carefully neutral. Fine, I said, avoiding his eyes. The usual. My phone buzzed with a text from Julia, Nate's sister. Is everything okay between you and Nate? Heard some concerning things today. I showed Nate the text. Your sister's been gossiping about us now? She's concerned, Nate said quietly. People are talking, Isolde. People need to mind their own business. Maybe if there wasn't anything to talk about, they wouldn't be talking. I felt my temper flare. You're being paranoid, Nate. Just because people are bored and looking for drama doesn't mean there's actually drama to find. Mommy, why do you look angry? Maddie asked in a small voice. I'm not angry, sweetheart, I said, forcing my voice to soften. Mommy's just tired. That night, after Maddie was asleep, my phone chimed with an email notification. The sender was listed as a concerned friend, and my stomach dropped as I opened it. The email contained 3 photos taken at the cafe that afternoon. One showed Colin touching my hand across the table. Another captured us laughing together, our faces close as we shared some private joke. The third was of Priya, gesturing dramatically, while Colin and I looked on, clearly amused. Thought you should know people are watching, the email read. Your husband deserves better. I deleted the email immediately, my hands shaking. Someone had been watching us, taking pictures. The violation felt enormous, but underneath that was a growing fear that maybe our friendship wasn't as innocent as I'd been telling myself. I found Nate in the living room, reading. Someone sent me photos of Colin and me at lunch today, I said. He looked up from his book. Anonymous? Yeah, it's creepy. What did the photos show? Nothing inappropriate, just us talking and laughing, but someone was clearly trying to make it look like something it wasn't. Nate studied my face for a long moment. Was it something it wasn't? Of course not, I said, but the words felt hollow even to me. Then you won't mind blocking his number tomorrow. I'm not going to let some anonymous creep dictate who I can be friends with, Nate. This isn't about the anonymous person, and you know it. I stared at him. This man I'd been married to for 6 years, and felt like I was looking at a stranger. When had we become these people? Suspicious, defensive, unable to trust each other. I'm going to bed, I said. As I lay in the dark, I thought about Colin's hand on mine, the way he really listened when I talked, how alive I felt when we were together. Was it so wrong to have someone in my life who made me feel valued and understood? My phone buzzed with a text from Colin. Hope you got home safely. Sweet dreams. I typed back, thanks, you too. Then I added, today was nice despite the drama. It's always nice when I'm with you, he replied. I stared at those words for a long time before finally putting my phone away. Whatever was happening between Colin and me, it was getting more complicated by the day. And despite what I kept telling everyone, I wasn't sure I wanted it to stop. 3 days later, I found Nate waiting for me in the kitchen when I came home from work. It was past 9 o'clock. I'd stayed late at the office, ostensibly to finish a project, but really to spend more time talking with Colin after everyone else had left. Maddie was already asleep, and the house felt unnaturally quiet. Nate sat at our small kitchen table, his laptop open in front of him, but his attention was entirely focused on me. We need to talk, he said. I set my purse down and opened the refrigerator, more for something to do than because I was hungry. About what? about the fact that you've been coming home later and later, about the constant texting, about the way you light up when your phone buzzes, but barely acknowledge me when I walk into a room. I grabbed a bottle of water and turned to face him. I've been busy at work, Nate. You know we're in the middle of the quarterly reports. This isn't about work, Isolde, and we both know it. Something in his voice made me look at him more carefully. His usual gentle demeanor was still there, but underneath it was something harder, more resolved than I'd seen before. I know about the daily lunch meetings, he continued. I know about the text conversations that go until midnight. I know about the way people at your office are talking. People love to gossip. Stop! His voice was quiet but firm. Just stop lying to me. The word lying hit me like a slap. I'm not lying to you. Then tell me the truth. Are you having an affair with Colin? My heart pounded so hard I was sure he could hear it. We're friends, Nate. I've told you that. Friends don't delete text conversations. Friends don't lie about where they're going. Friends don't make their spouses feel like strangers in their own marriage. I opened my mouth to deny it, but he held up his hand. I found the deleted messages, Isolde. I saw the photos someone sent you. I know you've been lying to me for months. The water bottle slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. You went through my phone? You left it on the counter while you were in the shower. It was buzzing constantly with messages from him. I wasn't snooping. I was worried someone was in trouble. You had no right. I had every right. For the first time in years, Nate raised his voice. I'm your husband. We promised to be honest with each other, to work through problems together, not run to other people when things get difficult. I felt cornered, defensive. Maybe if you'd been more emotionally available, I wouldn't have needed someone else to talk to. So this is my fault? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Nate closed his laptop and stood up. I'm going to ask you one more time, and I want a straight answer. Are you willing to end whatever this is with Colin? Block his number, stop the private meetings, and work on our marriage? The question hung in the air between us like a challenge. I thought about Colin, about how he made me feel seen and appreciated. I thought about our conversations, the way he understood my frustrations with married life, how he never made me feel guilty for wanting more excitement, more passion. It's complicated, Nate. No, it's not. It's actually very simple. You're either committed to this marriage or you're not. You're trying to control me, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. You're being emotionally abusive by trying to isolate me from my friends. Nate stared at me like I'd slapped him. Emotionally abusive? Yes, you're trying to manipulate me by making me choose between you and my friendships. That's textbook controlling behavior. Isolde, you're having an emotional affair, possibly a physical one. I'm asking you to choose between your marriage and another man. How is that controlling? Because you're not giving me any options. You're not trying to understand why I need this friendship. You're just demanding that I cut him off without any regard for my feelings. Your feelings about another man? My feelings about being trapped in a marriage where I feel invisible and unappreciated. The words hung between us like a bomb that had just detonated. Nate's face went very still, very pale. If that's how you really feel, he said quietly, then maybe we need to reconsider this whole arrangement. What's that supposed to mean? It means I won't compete with another man for my wife's attention. I won't beg you to choose your family over someone else. If you can't see what's wrong with this situation, then maybe we're already over. Fear shot through me, but I pushed it down. Don't threaten me, Nate. I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you that I have boundaries and you've crossed them. I deserve better than this. And what about what I deserve? What about my happiness? What about Maddie's happiness? What about the family we built together? Before I could answer, we heard footsteps on the stairs. Maddie appeared in the doorway, her elephant clutched tightly in her arms, tears streaming down her face. Why are you yelling at each other? She sobbed. Nate immediately knelt down and opened his arms. Maddie ran to him, and he held her tightly while she cried. It's okay, Bug, he whispered into her hair. Everything's going to be okay. But as I watched them together, I realized that nothing was okay. Nothing had been okay for a long time, and I wasn't sure it ever would be again. My phone buzzed with a text from Colin. "Thinking of you. Hope you're having a better evening than I am." I glanced at Nate, who was still comforting our daughter, and quietly typed back, "Same here. This is so hard." "I know, but you deserve to be happy. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for that." "Thank you for understanding. Always, you know I'm here for you no matter what." I put my phone away and looked up to find Nate watching me. Even with Maddie in his arms, his eyes were on me, and the disappointment I saw there was devastating. "I'm taking Maddie to Julia's tomorrow after school," he said quietly. "She doesn't need to be around this tension." "You can't just take my daughter." "Our daughter. And yes, I can. She's scared and confused, and it's our job to protect her from adult problems." After he carried Maddie back upstairs, I sat alone in the kitchen, my phone silent in my hands. For the first time since this all began, I wondered if I was making a terrible mistake. But then I thought about Colin's understanding, his support, the way he made me feel alive again. Surely I deserved to be happy. Surely that wasn't too much to ask. An hour later, I heard Nate moving around upstairs, the sound of drawers opening and closing. When I went up to bed, I found him packing a small suitcase. "Where are you going?" "Julia's. I need some time to think." "You're leaving me?" He paused in his packing and looked at me. "You left me months ago, Isolde. I'm just making it official." As I watched him pack, something inside me cracked. But instead of admitting I might be wrong, instead of fighting for us, I pulled out my phone and texted Colin, "Can we talk tomorrow? I really need a friend right now." His response was immediate. "Of course, I'll always be here for you." But as Nate quietly left the house with his suitcase, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to lose something irreplaceable. And for the first time, I wasn't sure Colin's friendship was worth it. The next afternoon, I stood in the school pickup line, trying to ignore the whispers and sideways glances from other parents. Word traveled fast in our small community, and apparently, everyone had heard about Nate moving out. "Isolde!" Sarah Martinez, another mum from Maddie's class, approached with that fake concerned expression people wear when they want gossip disguised as sympathy. "I heard about you and Nate. I'm so sorry." "We're just taking some time apart," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Working through some things." "Of course," Sarah nodded, but her eyes were hungry for details. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. Divorce is so hard on the children." "We're not getting divorced," I said sharply. "Oh, I just assumed. Well, when Janet from your office mentioned seeing you with that other man." My stomach dropped. "What other man?" "The one from the cafe. She said you two looked very close. I mean, I'm sure it's innocent, but you know how people talk." Before I could respond, Maddie came running out of the school building, her backpack bouncing behind her. But instead of her usual bright smile, her face was streaked with tears. "Mommy," she cried, throwing herself into my arms. "Emma said you and Daddy are getting divorced and I'm going to have to choose who to live with." I shot a furious look at Sarah, who had the grace to look embarrassed. "Sweetheart, that's not true. Daddy and I are just—" "Then why isn't he living at home anymore? Why did he take his clothes?" I knelt down to Maddie's level, acutely aware of all the other parents watching us. Sometimes grown-ups need a little space to work things out. But we both love you very much, and that will never change. But Emma's parents got divorced, and now she only sees her daddy on weekends, and he lives in an apartment with no yard and— "Maddie, stop. We're not Emma's parents. Everything is going to be fine." But even as I said the words, I could see she didn't believe me. How could she, when I wasn't sure I believed them myself? As we walked to the car, my phone rang. Julia's name appeared on the screen, and I considered not answering. But Maddie perked up when she saw her aunt's name. "Aunt Julia." Maddie grabbed the phone before I could stop her. "Daddy said I'm coming to your house today." I could hear Julia's voice through the speaker, warm and reassuring in a way that made my chest tight. That's right, sweetheart. Uncle Mark is making pizza, and the boys are excited to see you. Can Mummy come too? There was a pause. Maybe another time, honey. Today is just for you and Daddy. Maddie handed me the phone with a confused expression. I put it to my ear reluctantly. Julia. Isolde. Her voice was notably cooler than it had been with Maddie. I'm picking Maddie up in an hour. You can't just take my daughter. Our niece is upset and confused. She needs stability right now, not whatever drama is happening between you and Nate. There's no drama. We're just working through some marital issues. Is that what you call it? Julia's voice was sharp, because from what I hear, you're working through them with someone who isn't your husband. People are gossiping. People are concerned. There's a difference. You don't understand the situation, Julia. Then explain it to me. Explain why my brother is sleeping on my couch, heartbroken, while you're gallivanting around town with another man. I felt my temper rise. I'm not gallivanting anywhere. Colin is a friend who's been supportive during a difficult time in my marriage. A difficult time you created. That's not fair. What's not fair is what you're doing to Nate and Maddie. What's not fair is making a 7-year-old worry about whether her family is going to fall apart because her mother can't keep appropriate boundaries. The line went quiet for a moment, and I could hear Maddie humming in the back seat, oblivious to the tension in my voice. I'll have Maddie ready in an hour, I said finally. Good, and Isolde, whatever you think you're doing, whatever you think you're going to gain from this, it's not worth destroying your family. After she hung up, I sat in the car for a long moment, watching other families reunite after the school day. Fathers picking up children, couples walking together, the easy normalcy of intact families going about their daily routines. My phone buzzed with a text from Priya. Girl, the drama is everywhere. Janet from your office is telling everyone about your lunch dates. You're famous. I stared at the message, feeling sick. This wasn't funny. This wasn't some romantic comedy where the misunderstood heroine gets her happy ending. This was real life, with real consequences for real people. But then Colin texted, "Heard you had a rough day. Want to grab coffee and talk about it?" And despite everything, despite Maddie's tears, Julia's anger, the whispers, at school pickup, I found myself typing back, "Yes, I really need a friend right now." "Always here for you," he replied. "Meet you at our usual place in 20. As I drove to meet Colin, leaving Maddie with Julia and avoiding Nate entirely, I told myself I was just getting support from a friend. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I deserved to have someone who understood what I was going through. But deep down, a voice I'd been trying to silence was getting louder. What if everyone else was right? What if I was destroying my family for something that wasn't worth it? I pushed the thought away and focused on the anticipation of seeing Colin, of having someone listen to me without judgment, of feeling understood and valued. But for the first time, that anticipation was mixed with something else. Guilt. 2 weeks later, I decided to take control of the narrative. I was tired of being painted as the villain in my own life, tired of whispered conversations and pitying looks. So I planned a small gathering at our house, just a few close friends and family members, to show everyone that I was fine, that my life wasn't falling apart, that I had nothing to hide. I invited Priya, of course, and my mum. I also invited Colin, despite knowing it might be provocative. If we were really just friends, as I kept insisting, then there should be nothing wrong with having him over for a casual dinner party. Mum arrived first, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing her best supportive daughter expression. "You look wonderful, sweetheart," she said, kissing my cheek. "This house always looks so much brighter when you're happy." Priya came next, bringing her usual energy and a homemade dessert. "This is going to be so fun," she said, setting down a chocolate cake. "Like old times, before all the drama." "There's no drama," I said automatically. "Of course not. You're just living your best life." When Colin arrived, carrying flowers and looking handsome in a navy button-down shirt, I felt that familiar flutter of excitement. He hugged me hello, just a friendly hug, nothing inappropriate, but I was hyper-aware of how it felt, how he smelled like cedar and soap. "Thank you for inviting me," he said. "Your home is beautiful." "Thank you. I'm glad you could come." We were all sitting in the living room, drinks in hand, when the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Through the window, I could see Julia's car in the driveway, and my stomach dropped. I opened the door to find Julia standing there with Nate beside her. He looked tired but determined, and he was carrying a manila envelope that made my palm sweat. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "We came to talk," Julia said, pushing past me into the house. "About what's best for Maddie." "This isn't a good time. I have guests." "I can see that," Nate said quietly, his eyes finding Colin across the room. The living room fell silent as Julia and Nate entered. The contrast was stark, my carefully curated evening of friends and supporters suddenly invaded by the reality I'd been trying to avoid. "Everyone, this is my sister-in-law Julia," I said, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. "And my husband, Nate." Colin stood up awkwardly. "I should probably go." "No, please stay," I said quickly. "You're my guest." Julia's eyes narrowed. "So, this is Colin." "Julia," Nate said quietly, a warning in his voice. But Julia wasn't deterred. "I've heard so much about you. How long have you been friends with my sister-in-law?" "About 6 months," Colin replied, clearly uncomfortable. 6 months, Julia repeated, right around the time Isolde started pulling away from her family. What a coincidence. "Julia, that's enough," I said. "Is it? Because my 7-year-old niece is having nightmares about her parents getting divorced, and her mother is throwing dinner parties with the man who's destroying her marriage." "I'm not destroying anything," Colin said, finding his voice. "Isolde and I are just friends." "Friends," Julia laughed bitterly. "Is that what we're calling it?" Mom stood up, her wineglass in hand like a weapon. "I think you need to leave, Julia. You're being incredibly rude to Isolde's guests." "Rude?" Julia turned on her. "What's rude is encouraging your daughter to have an affair while her husband tries to hold their family together." "She's not having an affair," Mom snapped. "She's finally standing up for herself after years of being married to someone who doesn't appreciate her." "Someone who doesn't appreciate her." Nate spoke for the first time since entering, his voice dangerously quiet. "Someone who's worked 2 jobs to support this family. Someone who's been patient and understanding, while his wife emotionally checks out of their marriage." "You've been emotionally absent for years," I said, finally finding my voice. "Colin actually listens to me. He cares about my feelings." "I've been trying to save our marriage while you've been planning its funeral," Nate replied. Priya, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly jumped into the fray. "Maybe if you'd been a better husband, she wouldn't have needed to find emotional support elsewhere." The room exploded into arguments. Mom and Julia were facing off near the kitchen, their voices rising. Priya was defending me loudly, while Colin tried to excuse himself from the chaos. And in the middle of it all, Nate stood quietly, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "Stop," I shouted. "Everyone, just stop." The room fell silent. "This is my house and these are my friends," I continued, my voice shaking with anger and adrenaline. "I won't be attacked in my own home for having people in my life who actually care about me." "We all care about you, Isolde," Nate said quietly. "That's why we're here." "No, you're here to control me, to make me feel guilty for finally being happy." "Happy?" Nate's composure finally cracked. "You call this happy? Your daughter is terrified, your marriage is falling apart, and you're more concerned about defending another man than fixing your family. Maybe because my family isn't worth fixing." The words hung in the air like a physical blow. I saw Nate flinch as if I'd struck him. Julia's face went white. Even Priya looked shocked. "Isolde," Mom said quietly, "maybe you should—" "No," I said, tears streaming down my face now. "I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of being the bad guy for wanting more than this suffocating marriage. Colin makes me feel alive again. He makes me feel like I matter." Nate reached into his jacket and pulled out the manila envelope. Then you won't mind explaining these. He opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of printed papers. Even from across the room, I could see they were screenshots of text messages, printed emails, time-stamped conversations. Everything, Nate said quietly. Every late-night conversation about how unhappy you are in our marriage. Every lunch meeting you lied about. Every time you told him things you should have been telling me. Colin's face had gone pale. Nate, I never meant... Get out, Nate said, his voice deadly calm. Get out of my house and stay away from my wife. This isn't your house anymore, I said desperately. You moved out, remember? I moved out to give you space to figure out what you wanted. Now I know. He handed me the envelope. Divorce papers. I'm filing tomorrow. The room spun around me. You can't be serious. I'm done, Isolde. I'm done competing with him for your attention. I'm done being made to feel like the villain in my own marriage. I'm done watching our daughter suffer because you can't decide what you want. Nate, please. But he was already walking toward the door. Julia followed him, pausing only to look back at me with disappointment so profound it took my breath away. I hope he was worth it, she said quietly. After they left, the party fell apart quickly. Colin made excuses and left, clearly wanting to distance himself from the drama. Mum tried to comfort me, but even her support felt hollow now. Priya stayed the longest, but even she seemed subdued by the reality of what had just happened. When everyone was gone, I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by the debris of the evening, empty wine glasses, abandoned plates, the manila envelope sitting on the coffee table like an accusation. I opened it with shaking hands and began to read. Every text, every email, every private conversation I'd thought was just between Colin and me. Nate had been documenting everything, building a case, preparing for this moment. As I read my own words, complaints about our marriage, fantasies about a different life, intimate thoughts I'd shared with another man, I barely recognized myself. When had I become this person? When had I started treating my husband like the enemy and a co-worker like my savior? My phone buzzed with a text from Colin. I'm sorry about tonight. Maybe we should take a break from talking for a while. I stared at the message, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. Now that things were getting messy, now that there were real consequences, Colin was backing away. The man I'd risked everything for was already distancing himself from the wreckage. I typed back, I thought you said you'd always be here for me. The response took 20 minutes. I care about you, but this situation is too complicated now. I think it's best if we keep things professional at work. And just like that, it was over. The friendship that had felt so important, so worth fighting for, dissolved the moment it became inconvenient for him. I sat alone in my house. The house Nate had worked 2 jobs to afford. The house where we'd brought Maddie home from the hospital. The house where we'd planned to grow old together. And realized that I had destroyed everything for someone who was already walking away. The envelope sat open beside me, full of evidence of my betrayal, and for the first time in months, I saw the situation clearly. I hadn't been the misunderstood heroine of my own story. I had been the villain all along. 3 days later, I sat across from Nate in his lawyer's office, the fluorescent lights harsh and unforgiving overhead. The lawyer, Patricia Chen, was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who had clearly handled her share of messy divorces. She laid out the papers methodically, her voice professional and detached as she explained the terms. Mr. Lister is seeking primary custody of the minor child, with supervised visitation for Mrs. Lister initially, she said, not looking at me as she spoke. Given the evidence of emotional affair and the impact on the child's well-being, we believe this is in the child's best interest. Supervised visitation? I found my voice, though it came out as a croak. She's my daughter. A daughter who has been having nightmares and behavioral issues at school since this situation began, Patricia replied calmly. She opened a folder and pulled out more documents. We have statements from her teacher, her pediatrician, and several family members documenting the change in her behavior. I looked at Nate, sitting quietly beside his lawyer. He looked older than he had just a week ago, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. But there was a resolve in his posture that I'd never seen. "Nate, you can't be serious about this," I said. "I made mistakes, but I love Maddie. You know I love her." "I know you love her," he said quietly. "But love isn't enough anymore, Isolde. She needs stability. She needs to feel safe." Patricia continued reading from the documents. "Mr. Lister is also seeking to maintain the family home, given that he has been the primary financial provider, and Mrs. Lister has indicated she no longer wishes to maintain the marriage." "I never said I wanted a divorce," I protested. "You said your family wasn't worth fixing," Nate replied, his voice steady but tired. "In front of witnesses." The words hit me like a physical blow because they were true. I had said that, in anger and frustration, but I had said it. "Mr. Lister has also compiled financial records showing the marital assets," Patricia continued, sliding another folder across the table. "Given Mrs. Lister's lower income and the custody arrangement, spousal support will be minimal." I opened the folder with shaking hands. Bank statements, mortgage papers, investment accounts, our entire financial life laid out in black and white. I had never paid much attention to our finances. Nate had always handled the bills, the investments, the planning. Now I was seeing for the first time how much he had been carrying, how much I had been taking for granted. "I need time to get my own lawyer," I said. "Of course," Patricia nodded, "but I should warn you that Mr. Lister's case is quite strong. The documented emotional affair, the impact on the child, the financial records, it paints a clear picture." After the meeting, I sat shaking in my car, realizing the story I'd been telling everyone about my controlling, emotionally absent husband didn't match the man who'd quietly gathered receipts, messages, and dates while I was texting another man about how misunderstood I was. I called Colin, desperate for comfort, and he dropped me in seconds, hiding behind professional boundaries now that things were messy. The man I'd risked my family for vanished the moment there were real consequences. That night, I went to see Maddie at Julia's. She hugged me, then calmly asked if we were getting divorced and said her friend with divorced parents would rather have her old family back than 2 bedrooms and extra presents. When I begged Nate at the door to try counseling, he told me the truth I'd been refusing to hear. 6 months ago, maybe. 3 months ago, maybe. But I hadn't made mistakes. I'd made choices, and now we all had to live with them. The next morning, Patricia emailed the final divorce papers, limited custody, minimal support, the end of the life I'd treated like it was guaranteed. While I'd been playing the victim for Priya and Colin, Nate had been calmly building an airtight fair case, timelines, messages, lies, all laid out in that thick envelope on my table. For the first time, I ignored Priya's call because I didn't want to hear that I deserved better. I knew now that Nate did. 6 months later, in my small apartment across town, I watched Maddie sprint into his arms for their weekend together. He looked peaceful, lighter, like a man who had finally chosen self-respect. Nate's revenge hadn't been dramatic. It had been devastatingly simple. He let me have the freedom I insisted on, and all the consequences that came with it.